In the first 6 verses of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul begins to remind the Corinthians of the gospel message that he and the band of workers that was with him had brought to Corinth. They were messengers from God who had made us able ministers of the New Testament, as he wrote in verse 6. It was a message unlike any other, and it still is. In today's reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 7 to 11, Paul will tell us how different it is. But if the ministration of death written and engraven in stones was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, which glory was to be done away, how shall not the ministration of the Spirit be rather glorious? For if the ministration of condemnation be glory, much more doth the ministration of righteousness exceed in glory. For even that which was made glorious had no glory in this respect, by reason of the glory that excelleth. For if that which is done away was glorious, much more that which remaineth is glorious. We get all kinds of messages every day. I remember years ago when most of the messages that we received were delivered by the post office or the Royal Mail. We could have had 5 or 6 different items of mail each day. Some were bills, some were general items, some were personal, some were important, some were unimportant. Occasionally there would have been an item that stood out, maybe a wedding invitation or perhaps a birthday card with money in it. Some messages are special and some are particularly special. So the gospel that Paul brought was not the first message that God had sent. Indeed, in Hebrews chapter 1 verse 1, we're reminded that God at sundry times and in diverse manners spoke in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. One of the most notable ways in which God had spoken was on Mount Sinai, when the 10 Commandments were given. Moses described that wonderful message in this way: the Lord delivered unto me 2 tables of stone written with the finger of God. Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 10. It was a communication that shaped the life of an entire nation, the nation of Israel. Paul describes it in these words: the ministration of death written and engraven in stones, in verse 7. And it goes on to say that it was glorious at the end of verse 7. Now, we read in Exodus that when he brought the tablets of stone down to the people, the skin of Moses' face shone. Exodus chapter 34 verse 35. So much so that the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, in verse 7 of our chapter. Although that law would condemn the people because of their sin, it was the ministration of condemnation in verse 9. It did have a glory, but it was a passing glory, and that was illustrated by the fact that over the course of a few days, the glory of Moses' face diminished and disappeared. But what has eclipsed the glory of that law? It is the ministration of the Spirit, verse 8, the ministration of righteousness, verse 9. Paul is writing about the gospel message that he brought. It was a message of life and liberty. It hath brought life and immortality to light through the gospel, 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10. If that message, which was associated with death, had a glory to it, the law, would it not be the case that the message associated with life had a greater glory? It must be so. In fact, it is a greater glory, a surpassing glory. It is the glory that excelleth, in verse 10. Just as the glory of the sun outshines the glory of the moon, so the message of the gospel outshines all previous messages from God. Much more that which remaineth is glorious, in verse 11. So here's the challenge. Do I reflect the glory of the gospel in the way that I live? In the chapters that follow, Paul will show how the glorious message of the gospel was seen in the way that he lived and served God. And he would encourage us just to do the same.